Hello, I'm Ashy. I have with me today Des.
Hello, hello.
Last time we started our deep dive on Fighter, we were focusing on the basic class information and class features. Today we will continue looking, but this time we're focusing on the Fighter specific feats, items, and a couple of the boons that we've found that support Fighter. We will be saving mastery feats for a dedicated video because there are many of them, most of them are good, and they all have some exception that allows other classes to benefit from them. For example, the weapon mastery feats have their fighter class feature requirement, the weapon training, fulfilled with the martial focus feat. Armor mastery feats can have the armor training prereq fulfilled with armor focus feat. Fighters can take them earlier than other classes, though. Shield mastery feats, like the armor mastery feats, allow for fighters to take them earlier than other classes, and fighters can ignore shield focus as a prereq by having the armor training class feature. We will also exclude the feats that fighters just get a little bit more out of. There are enough feats already designed exclusively for the fighters.
Oh, yeah.
So, since we have many to cover, let's get started. So, starting out with the weapon focus feats. Weapon focus isn't a fighter feat in itself. However, greater weapon focus requires you to have 8 levels of fighter in order to take it. I'll mention that this, like a few fighter feats, can be taken by some classes and archetypes under certain conditions, but for most classes, weapon focus is a tax feat. For fighters, it's more of a way of life. What both weapon focus and greater weapon focus do is you select one weapon, that one gets a +1 to hit. The two feats stack with each other.
It kind of makes you into a bit of a specialist with that particular weapon.
Yes, that's the idea. So, weapon specialization, it's similar in all regards to a weapon focus, save its effect. Specialization grants a +2 to damage rolls with the selected weapon, and requires weapon focus as a feat. Greater specialization, like greater weapon focus, has the same effect as its previous feat and it stacks. The two can be taken at 4 and 12 respectively. With the two most generic feats out of the way, improved bravery! It allows for bravery to affect all mind affecting effects, not just fear. On its own, it is worse than the armed bravery weapon training, but keep it in mind because we're not done with it quite yet. Social bravery, it makes you harder to intimidate and to feint. It also boosts your intimidate and bluff checks. The rest of it more applies to NPCs than to player characters, but it's technically beneficial. Again, armed bravery might still be better, but the payoff is coming. Inspiring bravery is that payoff. It turns bravery into an AoE. If you have improved bravery, or social bravery, they share the same AoE for most of their effects. Social bravery doesn't spread its intimidate and bluff check boost. It can be suppressed by some crowd control, but an AoE anti-mind affecting blanket is just pretty decent. It's a good investment if you want your fighter to be able to support your party with more than just bonks. So now we have a series of feats for bravery here devoted to Caden. Bravery in action. It adds your bravery bonus to initiative. It's slower than improved initiative, but it'll stack with it, and it can scale higher and be boosted by things that boost bravery. So potentially you could get your initiative pretty high and your fighter will be pretty fast when that initiative, and that's not bad. Winning initiative is pretty good. Unbound bravery. It gives your bravery a bonus on attempts to escape grapple. If your bonus is +2 or higher, you can use an immediate action to give an ally that bravery boost, or the generic bravery benefit. It has to be done before the result of the check is revealed, but wording doesn't make it clear if it is before the dice itself is rolled. So, with a generous ruling, and how I'd personally rule it, you could see the dice, the result, but the DM hasn't told you whether it's a pass or a fail, you could probably boost them.
That sounds about right.
If they had rolled a 4, you might not be able to do much to save them. But if it's like, oh yeah, you rolled a 12, that might not be high enough, here's a bonus. That might make the difference at that point. Undaunted Bravery. It boosts your intimidate checks with your bravery bonus, and it increases the DC to intimidate you. I think it's kind of worse than social bravery.
Sounds like it,
Yeah,
honestly.
courage in a bottle. It gives you a +2 boost to your bravery if you're drunk. If the bonus is +6 or higher after you become immune to fear. I think it's a little bit silly, a little funny, and actually probably not bad. Though
Oh, honestly?
I do have to caveat that. If your DM requires you to have the sickent condition, like you've drunk until you're sick, its payoff suddenly doesn't really benefit you all that much anymore. Like, you're now offsetting the sickent penalty. Though if you're high enough to be immune to fear, it might be a fair trade-off if you're fighting a lot of things with fear auras. Schooled Resolve. I think it's generally worse than a lot of your similar effects. It grants your bravery bonus on will saves on mind-affecting spells and effects from vampires. If that's a mind-affecting spells and then effects from vampires, that's not terrible, but I'm assuming that it's all read together as both the effects have to be from vampires, in which case, not very good in that case.
Yeah, like it's more like mind-affecting spells and effects from vampires. That's how it seems to read.
Yeah.
Which
So,
I guess if you're playing in a campaign where you're going to be against a lot of vampires, it might be worth it, but probably not.
the campaign where you might actually be better off as a vampire hunter specifically, or possibly an undead ranger.
You know?
Yeah. Deadly Stroke. Deadly Stroke requires greater weapon focus as a feat requirement. It allows you to standard action swing on a stunned or flat-footed target for double the damage, and you can inflict a con bleed, which will give a lot of enemies a timer and a slow death if they cannot deal with it. Its prereqs allow you to set up Deadly Stroke for yourself, Dazzling Display being an AoE Intimidate, and Shadow Defenses allowing you to set up flat-footed for yourself by striking an opponent that has been spooked. They don't necessarily have to be spooked by Dazzling Display, they can be spooked by another means, and you can still get that benefit. Point Blank Master. It usually requires you to have weapon specialization, which is normally only accessible to fighter. It allows you to attack with a ranged weapon without provoking attacks of opportunity.
Very, very powerful. What's really funny though is a lot of the characters that typically use a bow can typically cheat into this.
Yeah, it's fairly cheatable. Like, I think Zen Archer can cheat into it. Ranger has, like,
I believe it's part of their
text.
combat styles that they can take, like, eventually. Slayer also just robbed the Ranger combat style.
Yeah. Still, the majority of classes can't exactly cheat into it, which it's still a fighter feat. It's nearly essential if you're a ranged fighter, because provoking AOs for just fighting something is not a place where you necessarily want to be.
You'd be surprised how many things have combat reflexes and will punish you for every arrow.
No comment. So, Pen Down. Pen Down is a feat that I think Wall would have really liked. So, if an opponent you threaten takes a 5-foot step or tries to withdraw, they provoke. If that AOO hits, they don't take damage, but it stops their movement. So, you can basically prevent all sorts of repositioning and the common form of escape, which is withdrawing. Which, because withdrawal is a full round action, that wastes their entire turn.
You know? Like, yeah, the 5-foot step might not waste their turn, but if they were trying to withdraw, that absolutely.
It definitely prevents an escape, though. Because if they attempted a 5-foot step, they can't move further. They still have a move action to burn, they can still full attack, but if they were trying to 5-foot step away out of sight of your reach, or they were trying to 5-foot step into a flanking position to enable their sneak attack.
Yeah, you just nope that shit.
You essentially kind of can turn some classes off or make it really hard for a lot of classes to deal with it. That said, a lot of big, meaty monsters probably won't care, unless you just cut off their withdrawal.
Yeah, to be fair, this is the kind of thing that if a DM puts it on their big, meaty monster, that is just scary, because you usually have to withdraw if you want to escape their range.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, oh no.
It can also be really funny for a polearm user, because you can usually 5-foot step into like an adjacent square to avoid their polearm. If you try and do that with this, they just bop you and you're sitting there.
It has a lot of little uses that I could see being really, really oof.
Yeah. Disruptive. So Disruptive is an anti-caster feat. If a fighter is able to AoO a caster, that caster has a +4 to DC to cast defensively. It feeds into Spellbreaker, which causes a caster that has failed their check to cast defensively to provoke an AOO, so you can punish their attempt at defensive casting. And they feed into other feats. Teleport Tactician allows you to AOO a creature that uses a teleportation effect to enter or leave a square that you threaten, even if they cast defensively or if they use a supernatural ability. Sunder Blessing allows you to suppress divine spells or spell likes with a combat maneuver check. Shatter Spell is dwarf specific, but it lets you dispel a spell with a Sunder maneuver.
You punch the spell right off of them.
Granted, it has a number of uses per day, which is a little bit sad. You can only get like up to 3 if you make it to 20.
Ugh, that is a little bit sad, actually.
But being able to break any spell is pretty cute, especially if you have an enemy that is relying on an extremely high bonus to AC that's making them nigh impossible to hit.
Like a lot of your DLC bosses.
I mean, yeah. Sure.
Those buffs, those scary buffs.
Yeah, I guess that's also another thing to note for Shatter Spell and Sunder Blessing, is that Greater Dispel also takes care of them, and with a Cyclops Helm you usually will just win, if you choose to just dispel everything.
Yeah, but we can't really drop that as a huge thing because, Cyclops Helm being a once per day thing, it's there's a good chance that if enough stuff is happening, they've used that before they've gotten to the boss of the area that's got all this. Or, hell, this doesn't even have to be the boss of the area. It could be the boss's wizard lieutenant who had a good amount of time to prep himself before they showed up there. The actual boss is through the door, but you gotta get through the wizard first. It's well, there goes your dispel, most likely, right there, trying to deal with that.
If the wizard's threatening enough, sure, yeah.
I mean, if you can't hit him, he's threatening enough eventually.
You're not wrong.
He'll kill you eventually if you can't hurt him.
You're not wrong.
Alright,
so Unbreakable. It's definitely a feat of all time. It requires endurance and toughness already, and its benefit is that you get 1 extra hit point whenever you take the +1 HP favorite class bonus for fighter. You also get a higher buffer before death while bleeding out. Between toughness and Unbreakable, you're getting 2 extra HP per level, not counting the favorite class bonus that you require in order to get the benefit from Unbreakable. So it can be a lot of HP. But generally, toughness is overlooked as a feat for extra HP is often deemed not good enough. Penetrating Strike. Penetrating Strike is a feat that's purpose is to penetrate damage reduction. The base feat cannot ignore flat DR, but ignores up to 5 points of other DR. Greater ignores up to 10 points of DR and up to 5 points of flat DR. Penetrating Strike, I think, is in an odd position where its value diminishes the moment high-level characters get +5 weapons. And with Greater requiring a level 16 fighter, by then you are a high-level character with probably a +5 weapon.
And I was gonna say, to be fair with that, even if you have the +5 weapon and everything, if you're dealing with something with flat DR or just 10 DR, that's not that much when you're a flat out fighter. You're gonna be able to deal pretty spectacular amounts of damage by that level.
Freaking hopefully. You should have plenty of flat damage by then.
Yes.
It's not some use cases though when a creature has high amounts of bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing DR, i.e. we'll use the Lich as an example with DR, bludgeoning, and magic, because part of that is bludgeoning. You need a bludgeoning weapon in order to get around it.
Yeah, it's the only type of DR is the damage types is the only kind that magic weapons don't just natively overcome.
I feel like the best case use for Penetrating Strike is that area where you've reached mid to high level, where you won't be able to afford a big +5 or +4 weapon. Granted, you're not gonna get the benefits of Greater Penetrating by then because Greater Penetrating comes so late. But you might be able to qualify for Penetrating at 12 and get some of that benefit. And Greater Penetrating might be more valuable if your DM is very stingy about your items and you can't just buy or get enchanted your high-level in-game weapons.
To be fair, I do know of another alternative to that. Penetrating strike could be really good if you're playing a fighter that is not specializing. So if you're walking in with like a +3 bow, a +3 club, and a +3 greatsword so that you can always have the damage types on you, then this will suddenly gain a little bit more value.
It does require weapon focus, and it does require it to be the weapon focus from that feat, but you can, through specific sets of feats or abilities, expand those weapon focuses, penetrating strikes, specialization. All those feats can be expanded out to other weapons, especially within like weapon groups. But like you'd have to basically make the narrow feat wide in order to really benefit.
Well, that or like I said, it's just you're just trying to invest in too many different weapons because I do typically try to have multiple damage types, and if I
Which,
can, I will try to enchant them.
good
But
practice.
typically, I will have my main weapon will be the one that gets the most love.
Makes sense.
Unless you're playing an Amaya whose like entire class is if you are wielding a rapier, at which point, well, no, I'm not going to use anything else because I lose all of my benefits when I'm not wielding a rapier.
Yeah. Whereas if you have like a
Even,
barbarian, suddenly just about every weapon is equally good in your hands.
I mean, the fact that in theory she could fight unarmed, but because her finesse is specific to rapier,
Yeah.
all right.
But also, like, neither a Maya nor a barbarian would be investing in penetrating strike because they're not fighters.
I'm pretty sure that, well, I mean, yes, but that is true. Well, I mean, there is some classes out there that can count as a fighter.
Yes,
Maybe it would be nice for them.
possibly.
Maybe.
So, greater shield focus seems like one I would include with the most generic sets, but I see it as like less common on builds. You know, when compared to weapon focus or specialization. It has a very generic effect of increasing the AC of shields that use by +1. Of note, neither shield focus nor improved shield focus require you to be a fighter of any level. Shield focus has the same benefit as greater shield focus, whereas improved shield focus does something different by reducing the ACP of your shields. Shield specialization. Shield specialization and greater shield specialization both require you to select one type of shield. They give a stacking +2 apiece to AC versus crit confirmation rolls. The first one lets you add your shield bonus minus any enhancement bonus to your CMD, and the second one lets you negate a crit once per day. They aren't terrible, but I personally wouldn't take them over many other options. Tripping Twirl. So, while this is arguably more of a staff Magus feat, it calls for weapon specialization, and it's technically a useful feat if you are built relying on a quarterstaff for some reason as a fighter, allowing you to trip everything adjacent to you. You know, the full round action. Yeah,
Hey, who knows? Maybe your favorite Ninja Turtle was Donatello, and you decided that since fighter can make any weapon dangerous, why not go for it?
as a Michelangelo stan, sure.
I mean, good luck making the nunchaku very good in this game either. They're
Oh, you're not wrong.
they're passable.
Okay, in my defense, I like Michelangelo because he's funnier.
Oh, he's my favorite too. I'm not. I was just saying that, like, why would you invest in a quarterstaff? Why not?
I mean, I see a hard case for investing in quarterstaff. However, I do see a little bit more case if you're doing the spirit inching style and making a polearm function as a quarterstaff
Uh,
by
I
sub
mean,
means. Maybe then.
here's a fun one. Use the quarterstaff because it's a double weapon. Grab that thing that gives you the war priest scaling as a fighter, and suddenly you're wielding a double weapon that's pretty insane with all of these crazy things like tripping everyone adjacent to you.
I mean, that very well may make quarterstaff much better.
It would look pretty impressive too.
It would look impressive. It would probably be much better. You could like drop the 2 weapon fighting benefits, wielding both sides of a quarterstaff. Yeah, yeah, I could see this as being a build. So now to wake everybody up with a more exciting feat. Impaling Critical. Impaling critical allows for you to stick your weapon into someone and impale them when you crit them. You have to hold on to the weapon to use the feat, and you can't attack with the weapon while it is impaling, but the impaled opponent takes the weapon's damage dice at the start of each of their turns. If the opponent leaves your reach, then you do need to spend a free action to let it go or pull it out. Pulling it out is an immediate action, which causes them to immediately take impalement damage. If the opponent wants to take it out, they can spend a move action to do so. And they take the impalement damage when they take it out. The improved version requires them to succeed at a grapple check against you to pull it out. If you had to let go, then they still require a standard action to pull it out, and if they ignore the weapon, their speed is halved. It also reduces their maneuverability by a stage if they are flying, or have flying. And when the weapon comes out, instead of the impalement damage, you can opt to deal a bleed equal to your weapon's damage dice. Critical versatility. Critical versatility, it's a human-specific feat. It allows you to spend an hour to gain a single critical feat that you meet the prereqs for, and you have it until you use the feat again to get a different one. This can be a decent feat if you are investing in crit feats and have a wide crit range weapon like a kukri or a falchion, since some critical effects don't apply to some creatures, but generally I imagine even those characters might just prefer to take just specifically the feat that they want. Critical mastery. It requires 2 critical feats, but for good reason. It allows the fighter to trigger 2 feats when they crit a target. I probably lean towards bleeding critical and stunning critical on like a 2-weapon kukri build myself, but there are options like using impaling earlier if you're relying on a piercing weapon like a wave blade or a rapier, with effortless dual wielding in that case. All in all, it's not a bad feat for fighters, but I recommend it only if you're using a weapon or weapons that can crit reliably. Disrupting Shot. Disrupting Shot is decent. It asks for the fighter to ready an action to shoot a caster when they cast. Increasing concentration DC isn't a bad effect, but you might get more value out of just shooting an enemy many times, unless you're like relying on Overwatch style or something. Vital Strike makes this feat better as well, as long as the DM isn't trying to argue the semantics of shooting an opponent with a readied action.
Ooh. Yeah, I was just reading about it, and the fact that it's just within 30 feet is...
That's kind of a big drawback. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, because it's asking for you to be 6th level, like, by then you've probably got many shot and rapid shot, and, like, yeah, no. No, just gun them down.
Yeah, you can probably just gun them down.
When I first heard about... Go ahead.
It's kind of like why I use the Vital Strike example, because Vital Strike, you're spending a standard action to dump a bunch of dice on somebody's head.
Yeah. No, when I first heard about this, I didn't think to look it up. I didn't know it had that 30-foot range, because I was thinking, like, okay, there's a couple of snipers that could probably make use of that, but no, if it's within 30 feet, it's like...
Yeah, it does have a 30-foot range. Most combat takes place within around 30 feet, in a lot of cases anyways, so it's not always relevant.
But if you're an archer, you absolutely do not have to engage within 30 feet.
It does mean that your point-blank shot's enabled, so that's +1 to hit and damage.
Woo! I'm a fighter!
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right.
the 30 feet requirement is a huge drawback, and like, chances are, if you're going to ready an action to shoot a caster with a Vital Strike, the Vital Strike damage enough will probably disrupt their spell casting. Like,
I'm still going to drop that I feel the best use of this, because readying an action is a standard action. So if you get like the surprise round, since you would only normally be allowed a single arrow, maybe then it could be good to just get into this stance if you guys got the surprise round, just to mess up the caster the first turn he tries to cast.
Be invisible by some means. Sneak into the fight. Radiant action to put an arrow in the caster if they start casting a spell.
I mean, that is a way to do it.
So, quick study. It allows you to gain a combat feat, but it asks you to train with a partner, and your partner's feats determine what feats you can take. You still need to qualify for the feat. While I could see critical versatility as potentially being good, I have a hard time saying quick study is any good. Mostly because you're just relying on someone else's build to draw feats from. And taking 8 hours to learn the feat kind of adds to that fire. We're only like a minute or even an hour, it'd be much less of a time investment during the adventuring day, and you could reasonably switch it out with some level of frequency. I feel like you'd actually just take the feat that you want.
My only thought on this one is I feel like it's good in terms of if you have a group that is investing in teamwork feats that you decided not to invest into, then this could be fun to like switch from the feat that you want into a teamwork feat and then switch back like the next day when you're not when you're done adventuring or done using that teamwork feat. But at the same time, you're playing a fighter, so odds are you're going to be the one that has enough feats to take all the teamwork feats your allies have and still do whatever it is you wanted to do very reliably.
And let's not forget, there's a weapon training that is basically just like the Inquisitor's class feature that lets you just treat your allies as if they had your teamwork feats.
Ah, right, yes, like treat it like solo tactics.
Yeah.
But taking one of those does take up a slot of something else. Like if you didn't want to use one of your precious like weapon mastery slots,
True.
because you do get limited of those and until you start taking like I believe there's actually a feat to get more.
We'll cover that in the near future.
Yeah.
Modification Trainer. Do you like armor and weapon modifications? Do you even know what they are or what they do? If yes, you might like this feat. Maybe. This feat lets you take modifications selected with the Armor Adept and Weapon Adept, and train allies equal to your Charisma modifier on how to use them. These modifications aren't bad at all in themselves, but they aren't a system that I see brought up very often. Ergo, your party might not use them even if you invested in them yourself, as well as this feat. And if they are interested, the benefits last for 8 hours, which might be very useful for your adventuring day. Martial Versatility. This is a feat that Dev has mentioned a few times, or I think specifically Martial Mastery. But Versatility lets you to take a combat feat like Weapon Focus, and it selects a single weapon, and you can apply it to the rest of that weapon group. Martial Mastery is the upgrade at level 16 that lets you take all the feats associated to a specific weapon and apply it to all the weapons in the same group. It is both fighter specific and human specific. It is similar to the Advanced Weapon Training Specialist that allows you to take feats equal to your weapon training bonus and apply it to all feats within the weapon training group. Either choice is good if you want some variety.
I personally feel this goes best on something like the polearm tree, because with the polearm tree you get some really good options to use in close range, but you also get a lot of good reach weapons.
So, finally, let's get down to Advanced Armor Training and Advanced Weapon Training. They are associated with their respective class features, and they allow you to take an extra Advanced Weapon Training or Advanced Armor Training. The Armor Training one is available once per 3 levels, and the Weapon Training is available once per 5. You can clearly see that one is valued a bit over the other. Advanced Weapon Training has some additional text specific to the Weapon Master archetype, allowing them to take this feat a level earlier and also with greater frequency. You know, if they're using their bonus feats to take it. So with that being the last feat I want to talk about today, let's talk about some equipment. So here we have the Amulet of Courage. 6,000 GP, so not particularly on the expensive side. It has a dandy ability that if you are affected by a magical or supernatural fear, it will cast Remove Fear on you. And that will suppress the fear for the duration of the Remove Fear effect. Chances are that'll be longer than the fear will last in most cases. And if you happen to have the Bravery class feature, your saving throw against fear increases by 1. The way that it's written might be a little overly specific, but I as a DM personally would rule that it increases your bravery bonus, so it would affect the other things in a cascade. I could see a DM ruling against that, but I'm not the fun police. It is a neck slot item, which you might see as a downside because it's competing with, say, like an Amulet of Natural Armor, which would be a pretty standard AC item. But if you don't mind not having that Amulet of Natural Armor, Amulet of Courage can get you out of fear effects and can help your bravery just be better, which if that cascade affects into other things, then it's great. At least for its price of 6,000. The Band of the Stalwart Warrior. You might be seeing a theme. So, the Band of the Stalwart Warrior, it's a headband slot item. It costs like 14 grand, so it's a little bit pricier than the previous item. It's got 3 effects, the first being if you would be suffering from frightened or panicked, and essentially the wording says a fear effect, so I would imagine that a mummy's paralyzing aura would function as well, because that is also fear. You would just become shaken instead. Which, being shaken is much better than being paralyzed or running in fear. You also get this cute +2 combos bonus on all will saves against fear. That's not the important part. The part that we're focusing on here for fighter is your bravery class feature is considered 4 levels higher, which that will undeniably cascade into any other benefits that bravery is providing you, i.e. feats or armed bravery class feature. The Sash of the War Champion, kind of on the cheap side at only 4,000. It's a chest light item, which good chest lights might not be the most common thing. So for fighters, this is pretty dandy. And it advances your armor training and your bravery class feature by 4 levels, which means you can still get some good benefits out of armor training even if you spend the rest of your armor trainings on advanced armor training. And again, advancing bravery. Great if you're building into bravery or have armed bravery.
Yes.
Gloves of Dueling. 15k hand slot item. A lot of hands aren't very good, so this is a pretty much just a shoe-in for a fighter. It has multiple effects again, the first being +4 to CMD versus disarm, sunder, or effects that would just cause you to lose or drop your weapon. It prevents you from dropping your weapon if you're panicked or stunned, which is nice. And here's the tasty part for fighter. If you have weapon training, and are using an appropriate weapon training bonus is increased by +2. That on its own is almost equivalent to like 8,000 gold pieces worth of stats, considering that's the cost of what a +2 weapon is. But I'd argue it's even better because, like, if you have a +2 weapon already, now you've got essentially like a +4 weapon minus bypassing the effects bypassed by Magic Weapon 3 and Magic Weapon 4. And like advanced weapon trainings that care about how high your weapon training bonus is are getting a boost from this, which is absolutely great if you happen to be building into those. But even just a base fighter, and you're not, +2 weapon training is fucking awesome.
Yes.
Okay, Manual of War. I feel like this object's a little bit odd, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's 7,500 gold pieces, so it has a cost to it. It's slotless, so it's not occupying a slot. It has a weight of 2 pounds. Whether that matters to you or not, probably not, you're a fighter. Now for its effect. You study it for an hour. You can change one fighter bonus feat. You exchange it for another. You gotta meet the prereqs for the new feat. It can't be a feat that you're using as a prereq for another feat, or another prestige, or another ability. And the change persists for 24 hours, after which time it returns to normal. You can spend 10 minutes to study the manual into its effects early. This item is kind of like what some of the previous feats would want to be. I'm of the mind that I'd probably be pretty sold on whatever feats that I'm building into. But it is an item that grants fighter extra flexibility, so it can't really be all that bad. I'd just be confident in my own feat choice when I took feats. Des, do you have an opinion?
It's kind of what quick study should have been, but at the same time, yeah, no, like as you said, you should be generally like you should have your build planned out, and to be fair, if you don't like a certain feat, I have yet to run into a DM who doesn't allow for just using retraining rules. So instead of buying an item that's this expensive, just spend like 1/4 the amount and just like change it permanently to something you actually want to use.
Yeah.
The fact that it will not let you cheat something kind of limits its use to being like, okay, well, it's literally just picking something else that you could have already picked to begin with. If you wanted to use that, why didn't you pick it?
Yeah, I definitely see it as a case of, like, if your build isn't entirely generic feats, and you have some toys in there, but some toys won't work for an encounter that you know is coming up, you can swap your toy out for something else that could be useful in that case or situation. But I kind of agree that if you're buying this item to be like a build fixing item, just fix your build with retraining. It's cheaper. It's way cheaper. You'll spend less than a quarter of the cost retraining basically most of your feats probably by the time you be able to buy this. But yeah, if you do have toys and you want to trade those toys out, like let's look at Zoe for example. Zoe is a fighter. Zoe is a pretty crap fighter. Zoe is a fighter that I am knowingly taking kind of not good feats on, like Deadly Dealer. Deadly Dealer is absolutely a toy. I might consider a Manual of War because I might occasionally decide, you know, Deadly Dealer could really be something else for the next 24 hours. That's a case for Manual of War.
Yeah, because to be fair, like I'm sure Zoe wants to keep Deadly Dealer just because it fits with her fluff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get that one. Deadly Dealer, much better on the card Caster Magus.
Much better on the class it's designed for.
Yes. Hey, to be fair, I think a rogue could do some pretty scary shit with a deck of cards like that.
Possibly. Very possibly, to be honest. But, like, we're talking about rogue here. If you're able to sneak attack anything, it doesn't really matter what you're throwing at them.
Yeah, there's a reason why darts and fucking whips, despite being terrible weapons, it typically are scary in the hands of a rogue.
Yeah. Alright, so, Mastering. Mastering is a shield special, enhancement. But Mastering is actually kind of cool for shields. It allows you to use your highest weapon training bonus for your shield bashes. So you get your weapon training bonus to your shield bashes, which is already pretty cool. If it happens to be the closed weapon group, which is the weapon group that shields belong to, you can instead apply like your greater weapon focus, specialization, yeah, those feats. And if you happen to have weapon mastery, i.e. level 20 fighter, you get the weapon mastery bonus to your shields, which means they crit a little bit better.
I hate that dual wielding shields is actually a build thanks to all the shield support.
I mean, hey, I would dual wield claws. I'd be tempted to. It'd be freaking funny.
It wasn't even claws. It's just people running in with 2 steel shields because it works with the weapon mastery.
You're not wrong.
Not the weapon mastery, the shield bash mastery and all that stuff. It lets you like you can dual wield them, but without taking the dual wield penalties because I'm not dual wielding them, I'm shield bashing with them.
You know, that's stupid. I kind of love it.
It's so dumb, but it's an effective build.
Yeah, I think in that case, you wouldn't realistically need mastering shields because you probably have weapon focus, weapon specialization for shields already.
Yeah, but this would let you add your weapon training bonus to it all too.
Yeah, but you'd get that anyways if you happen to be in the close weapon fighter group.
Yeah, that is true. Oh man.
This is definitely asking you to have 2 different weapons, and bashing with a shield already pretty viable with Shield Master. This just makes it even better. Assuming you're not doing dual shields. I love that that's viable. That's so funny.
It's viable. It's meta in some circles.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Alright, so the last item I'm going to talk about today, the last wall banner. So we're going to skip over the first 2 versions, Horde-Line and Harkrist. They just boost your like defenses against fear. One of them affects armies. We're going to go straight down to the Sunwald, which is the expensive 125k flag. It's very pricey, but its effect's also really, really silly. Once per day, while this banner is held aloft or planted by someone with the Bravery class feature, which is the important part that we're looking at, or the Flag Bearer feat, which means that other classes can use it as a flag bearer. While this banner is visible, it's granting Blessing of Fervor as the spell to all the allies of the person who, like, waved it around or planted it. Blessing of Fervor, for those that don't know, is basically a divine equivalent to haste. Though, like, while haste gives all of its benefits up front, the +1 to hit and AC, the extra attack, the extra move speed. Blessing of Fervor has it split into blocks. You can either get an extra attack, you can get a +2 to your AC, your attack rolls, or your reflex save. You could get extra move speed, or you could get the ability to cast a 2nd level spell, but affected by like the Still or Silent or a couple other meta magic feats. It's kind of bonkers. It's probably arguably less good than Haste, but it's kind of bonkers because this effect does not have a duration. It's while visible. Now, if the banner is like disturbed while planted, if the enemies play capture the flag and manage to topple it or deface that banner, hit it with a sunder, then suddenly the bad guys have 10 rounds of Blessing of Fervor and you've lost the bonus. But if they're not able to do so,
Like if it's being held aloft, good luck taking it from the fighter.
Right. Take it from the fighter's cold dead hands.
I think I found an item Arya might invest in since she's a flag bearer.
I mean, it's pricey.
But she's a flying bard, unless they have ranged.
Right. Unless they can range sunder it or you roll a natural 1.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the last item we'll talk about, and probably the most ridiculous and expensive one that we'll talk about today.
I like that most of the things that a fighter wants to pick are fairly cheap, and then suddenly this banner, oh, and here's the one where you're going to spend 100 and something grand on it. It's like, that's why everything else the fighter has is cheap, because they were handed the most expensive flag in the world.
I mean, yeah, this flag isn't, like, essential or anything. Most of these items aren't. I would recommend I would recommend the Sash of the War Champion, because you're probably not using your chest slot item.
And Gloves of Dueling, for sure.
Gloves of Dueling, because they're probably the best gloves that you're going to get, save, like, a few others, possibly, if you want specific effects from your gloves, other than more hit and damage. But,
it's very hard to... like recommend the Band of the Stalwart Warrior as much, like except for its like reducing fear to shaken. That's okay.
It's a good item, but it's competing with your head slot or headband slot.
It's competing with your headband, which might not be too bad, but the problem is the +4 to the bravery class feature probably wouldn't stack with the Sash of the War Champion because they're both magic items. If your DM let them stack, then yes, go for both. Absolutely, that'd be bonkers. Counting is almost 10 levels higher. Fuck.
That is a concern because of how Paizo. Sorry, I'm used to blaming WotC for stupid shit. Because of how Paizo redefined sources.
WotC did it in 3.5, so a lot of that is carryover. You can still blame them.
Because the wording is the same, it might be argued to not stack. But if it's allowed to stack, which realistically, in my opinion, it should be allowed to stack because 2 different items, then yeah. I would have to check that to see if those 2 items are considered stacking, if there's an errata specific to it. I don't know. But let's get on to the couple of boons that I found, because I did find a couple of boons that fighters can benefit from that specifically call out their class features. Now, they're not the most amazing of boons, but they might be worth consideration, considering that you can technically just take a feat to get the benefits, and these aren't all the benefits the boons are offering, just the ones that list a fighter benefit. So, for Urgathoa, we have a couple Sentinel boons, both the 2nd and 3rd. The 2nd Sentinel boon, if you've selected Heavy Blades group for your weapon training class feature, then you're increasing your attack and damage bonus by 1. It's technically not the same as boosting your Heavy Blades weapon training by 1, but depending on DM ruling, it very well could be, because, let's be fair, a lot of the wording throughout all the things just aren't consistent. And it also has a bonus if you're not a fighter with a weapon training class feature, where you just get a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls with Scythe, but we don't care about that bit too much for this video. It's not useless for not fighters, but fighters are eaten okay. The next one, fighters are eaten pretty well. You boost your bravery by 1. Your bravery now applies to saving throws against spells and effects generated by undead creatures. That can be a big deal, because that's no longer just saying, yeah, it affects will saves only. It's spells and effects generated by undead creatures. Now, I'm not one typically for like specific creature hosing effects, but undead are pretty ubiquitous all throughout. Chances are you will encounter a lich at some point, and then that lich will throw a fireball at you and you'll get your bravery bonus to your reflex save, or maybe they'll blight you or something and ask for a fort save. In any case, there's also a cute little bonus for those who don't have bravery, where they just get a +2 profane bonus on saving throws against spells and effects generated by undead. So, Caden Killeen also offers something for those with the weapon training light blades class feature. If you're using one of the select selection of weapons, you get a +2 deflection bonus to AC. That, I'd argue, is way less good because that's not stacking with your ring of deflection. Unless you're ignoring that AC item, in which case, okay, yeah, cool, you can take 2 different rings. But if you were intending on it, that bonus is potentially, possibly, very well just wasted. And the bonus of, if you don't have that class feature, you get a +1 on attack rolls when using weapons from the Light Blades weapon group. I mean, +1 to hit isn't bad, but probably not worth a boon. Though it might be much better in the respect of other boons. I think that's a good place to wrap up. You got any closing thoughts, Des?
My closing thought is, after some research, it does say that, well, people say that because they are benefits from 2 different sources, but that are untyped, they would probably stack.
I'm pretty sure that Paizo tried to kill untyped stacking, but also...
At one point. Yeah, probably.
I'm
But
quite
hey,
happy with
have fun.
the idea that they stack.
Hey, if your fighter wants to go and grab all this stuff, let them, because they need all the help they can get. Remember, they're the big dumb fighter, and fighters are bad.
Oh, that one hurt me. I just finished convincing Wall that fighters are good.
But
Well,
yeah,
anyways.
last thoughts. Fighters are very versatile. They're very good at fighting. So you can't really go wrong. Like, they can be built in a multitude of ways, but you generally know what you get when you're opening the tin. You're getting the dude that's going to be able to front line, whether you're trying to be the big knight in shining armor or a decent archer. I mean, fighters can arguably make the best archers out there, so
Yeah,
have fun with it. Enjoy your build. Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing. Especially if you want to free Des from my clutches.
Help,
She'll be held hostage
help.
until I reach enough subscribers, as determined by probably Law. Possibly by Des, we'll see. Ciao!